that he then U-turned. The EU Trade Commissioner is speaking to his US counterparts tomorrow.
Katja Adler there for us. Some of the largest tariffs were reserved for countries in Southeast Asia, many of which produce things like textiles, clothing, and shoes for the U.S. market. Vietnam is facing import duties of 46%. Apparel giant Nike relies on the country for about half of its footwear products. Thailand was slapped with 37% tariffs. Many manufacturers have shifted production there from China in recent years. And Cambodia was dealt a whopping 49% tariff, which could hurt its garment and footwear industries. Let's talk more about the impact those tariffs could have on the U.S. textile industry. We're joined now by Mark Yeager, a cotton farmer and the owner of Redland Cotton in Moulton, Alabama, and Charles Gainsland, the CEO of Loftex Home, which manufactures home textiles like towels. He's also the president of the Home Fashion Products Association, which represents American textile manufacturers. Really good to have you both on the program, Mark and Charles. Thank you so much for joining us. Mark, I want to start with you because you have said that you think or you hope that tariffs will spark a greater investment in the U.S. textile industry and will lead to more purchase orders through the supply chain here. How quickly do you anticipate that happening?
Well, I guess it's kind of hard to say, but I do know in dealing with the supply chain that we have dealt with for the last 9 years, it's pretty inadequate. I mean, there's one finisher left that we can use on our bedsheet wide fabric, and there's only 2 mills that can weave wide to make a bedsheet. So there's a lot of issues.
Meaning, just to follow up on that, meaning, to meet the kind of demand that you'd need to here in the U.S., you really have to ramp up. Is that right?
I think so. And I think that's probably what his idea is. And I don't know how many businesses can get into, I know they can't do it overnight, but
right.
We're hoping that there'll be more people want to make here, more mills get involved, and we have a supply chain that is competitive with each other, and we can get more work done. The looms that the mill that we're using now, some of those looms are 1978 models, I think. I mean, it's incredibly old.
Well, let me ask Charles about this as well. Charles, you have said that you see home textiles, bedding, towels, for example, as fundamental goods for families. What do you think of what we just heard there from Mark?
Well, our take on it is that Mark's got towards that and saying that there was a limited capacity in the U.S. I think the situation is much worse than that. The U.S. essentially has no home textile industry for producing the staple items that consumers need to buy every day, towels and sheets and things like that. That the capacity in the U.S. is effectively near zero. Our capacity couldn't even supply a fraction of a percent of the U.S. demand at present, and we believe that it's highly unlikely that the production will shift back to the U.S. and that people will make investments in the U.S. manufacturing.
Why do you think that is,
for home
Charles?
textiles.
Why is that unlikely?
It's unlikely because of high capital costs to create the plants. A lot of the knowledge of how to do this is lost in the U.S. So there's a big knowledge gap in terms of how to make products like home textiles, and the wage differences between the U.S. and countries that are currently producing the home textiles is significant. So we don't even with the punitive tariffs that are in place, we don't see the production investment moving back into the U.S. in any significant way.
Okay.
But rather shifting from one external country to another.
Mark, I want to get your take on that as well, because you've talked about you wanting fairer business conditions here in the U.S. That includes, of course, fairer wages. Wouldn't that mean that the prices for goods like the ones you produce will have to go up?
I don't think they have to go up. I think maybe they reach the par value. The country is using, from what the Cotton Council says, 21 million bales of finished goods in the United States. Now, I don't believe those people who the importers, I think they're going to run into a lot of trouble with this tariff. And I think if there's money to be made, I think that will come back to the United States. And if you look at what's happened since NAFTA, all these little small towns where we had cut and sews, shirt factories is what they called it here in my hometown. They exchanged that for a government check and meth and crack. So, I mean, we've got serious problems here in rural flyover America, and I believe that that's kind of where it started.
Okay. I want to get your take on that as well, Charles, because the point that we just heard Mark make there is one that we've heard from many producers, which is that NAFTA and free trade deals really have hollowed out manufacturing in the heartland of the U.S.
Well, to a degree, they're right. And I think that some industries have suffered, and perhaps the government hasn't done enough to retrain people. And I agree with that point. I would like to say that whether I don't believe that the manufacturing for home textiles will come back to the U.S. I think that there are other industries that are likely to come back, but not this one. But whether or not the manufacturing comes back to the U.S., either it comes back to the U.S. or we're facing punitive tariffs from countries outside of the U.S. Either way, the prices to the U.S. consumer on staple products go up significantly.
Mark, are you exporting stuff to global markets as well? And could you be impacted then by retaliatory tariffs that we see from other countries?
Very little. I mean, we've had some sales in Canada and Mexico and Europe, but very little, very little. It's our success has been here in the United States.
Okay, so if the president says, like double, triple your production in the next 2, 3 years, would that be possible?
I think so. I think so. Again, I hope what he does brings in air jets instead of old shuttle looms that we're using from the 1970s. I would love to see it get modernized. But as far as the labor goes, I don't think, we're facing Asian labor, Vietnam, China, India. I know labor's cheaper, but, we fought a war over this a long time ago. I think it's time to take care of our own. A great country's got to be able to clothe itself and at least get its bed clothing. I think it can come back. I think if there's money to be made, people can bring it back.
All right. Well, really interesting discussion with both of you. Mark Yeager, cotton farmer, owner of Redland Cotton in Moulton, Alabama, and also Charles Gainsland, CEO of Loftex Home, manufacturing home textiles. A great conversation. We hope to pick it up with you guys again, maybe in a few months, and see how things develop.
Thank you very much for having us.
Okay, you're watching World News America. Coming up in a few moments on our program.